our direct experience is saying this instant is in the most radical kind of flux and flow and fluidity, and that's our experience from instant to instant. And so our perceptions vanish as they're perceived. The arising of this perception is also its vanishing. If we look at it, with some care and curiosity, it will reveal the impossibility of definition, the impossibility of conceptualizing what this is, because how do we define something that is forever shifting? Well, we can't.
Hello and welcome to the Nonduality podcast. Nick Haim here from nisargayoga.com. In this episode, Paul Dobson speaks with John Astin. This is part one of their conversation.
Hi John, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. I noticed that you had sort of more of an awareness-based approach in the past, but now it's kind of this open-ended, very, I guess simple. Yeah. Whatever is happening right now, we don't know what it is.
Yeah. And
just exploring that fact.
The other day I was looking back through my work in these areas, my writing, and I realized that from the very, very, very beginning of sort of trying to communicate about this stuff, that there was this theme, even though I may have been framing things, say, in terms of, as you mentioned, like awareness as a doorway into, a kind of a deeper understanding, a deeper connection to what this is, that ultimately I couldn't really say what this was. And it, the very title of my first book was Too Intimate for Words. So it was like that intuition was clearly there, that ultimately this is beyond description, clearly. And yet I was, of course, as a communicator, attempting to describe the indescribable somehow, and so I've just noticed that over time that seemed to be this kind of resounding, repeating theme in my own explorations, that I really can't quite grasp hold of what any of this is, even though I'm using words and the spiritual traditions, when you read them often, it comes across as if somebody's figured out sort of the structure of this somehow, the way to describe, different elements of it. And I would just say that the more I explored, the more that just didn't hold up, that I really couldn't pin this down. I really couldn't, I couldn't get to the bottom of what any of my experiences are, including this thing called awareness, which I would, had historically written about and talked about and pointed people to, but even that, is I don't know what that is.
Well, it's a good pointer though, isn't it?
Yeah. It's one way of describing what's going on here, which is that there seems to be we could say, what are we certain about? We could start there. Is there any certainty? Well, it seems that something is here, something is occurring that we could call experience, or we could call reality, we could call life. Something is here. That seems undeniable. That seems self-evident. That experiencing is occurring, and so it makes sense that awareness would have kind of evolved as a pointer to this, because that fact of experiencing is being known, which is how it's appearing. It's being known, right? So that seems to be like fundamental to this, is that it's being known somehow, being recognized, it's being noticed. So we could call that awareness, which is as fine a word as any to describe that kind of aspect of reality, which is that no matter what's occurring, by definition, it's being known. That's how we know that it's occurring, right? It's being recognized.
That's what we can know, really, isn't it? That it's something is occurring here. I quite like in your book you compare it to a dream. It's actually something I've been comparing it to for a while, because I went through a stage of very much into lucid dreaming. It's the exact same experience as right now. There's phenomena occurring, and it appears to be outside myself. So what can I really know for sure? Is this another dream? I would never know if this is another dream or not. If this does turn out to be a dream, what can I say for sure is, well, there's an awareness happening, there's this experiencing happening.
Right.
All I can say really beyond that is kind of adding stuff in on top of that really basic fact.
Yeah, and of course we tend to, if you will, within conventional reality, the sense of sort of how we tend as humans to think about what's going on, we think about there being a world that we are then experiencing. And fair enough. I mean, that's one perspective. And we can talk about, I do sometimes talk about my work as offering a particular perspective, which we can think of as just one of an infinite number of perspectives.
Yes.
Not necessarily the perspective.
No, that's an important point as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is, because people will often bump up against this, when I'm speaking about these things, like, well, what about? Yeah, but I mean, are you saying, like, if, for example, I say from this perspective that I'm speaking about, you and I are exploring that we really can't find separation, but from another perspective, it's like, no, you're an autonomous creature with your own presumed life, and I am as well, and your life story is not my life story. I have a daughter. Maybe you don't have a daughter. So that's another perspective. Yeah. But what I play around with in my work is sort of, you could say, like, consider it kind of a hypothesis that what's primary is not a world that you're then experiencing, which is just a presumption. Maybe it's true, but it's a presumption. What if experience is what's primary?
Yeah. And
it's what we really know, in a sense, is experience. It's what we're intimately familiar with is experience. And so my work really explores the different ways in which our experience itself really challenges most of our conventional ideas about what's going on here, and that we kind of operate from those assumptions, separation being a good one. Like we imagine that we're a subject navigating a world of objects. I mean, that's just, everyone takes that for granted. But it's very interesting, because if we just actually feel the presence of our own experience, the evidence of that separation isn't apparent. There's a seamlessness to experience. We can't really find a discrete subject and discrete objects. We just find a kind of, well, I would just say a seamlessness, where we can't really find clear, discernible lines separating one object or one phenomena from another phenomena. That's not actually what we're experiencing.
No, it's almost like we've overlaid this sort of two-dimensional thinking thing over our experience. It's this experience is where it's dimensionless, but let's say it's three-dimensional, and it's almost like we've overlaid this two-dimensional kind of viewing glass over it, and we're using our thoughts, which are based in map world. Basically, they're not based in the real actuality of what's happening here. They're based in imagination, and right. It separates it all out, doesn't it? It's not the raw fact. It's always an after the fact occurrence, all these thoughts.
Right.
You can view that the thoughts are part of that raw actual reality and not separate from it at all, not a problem to be overcome, which is seems to be a popular notion in the spiritual path.
Well, absolutely. I mean, yeah, thoughts are the boogeyman, It's like that we have to kind of somehow get rid of. But, that exploration, which I invite people into, of, well, let's just not assume because we have words to describe what's here. We have this incredible language to seemingly characterize what's occurring. Let's not necessarily assume because we have this language and these concepts to characterize and categorize and describe the phenomena that is appearing here. Let's not assume that we actually know what the phenomena are more basically, more fundamentally. And thought's a great example. I mean, have any thought, just conjure up some thought right now, and what is that actually? And when I pose those questions, it's very easy for people to hear them as a kind of analytical question, like, explain to me, what a thought is, as a kind of analyze it in that sort of way conceptually. But it's more like, what is, I say, what is experience like made? What is it made of? Like, what's it constructed of? What are the, in the same way you would say, that matter is made up of elemental particles, which themselves are made up of, well, God knows what, but we say, the particles of matter and the subatomic particles, and then those are constituted of quantum fields or whatever. I mean, I'm not a physicist, so I don't want to try to talk about it because I don't know. And I'm not sure the physicists really know either. So it becomes sort of increasingly like ambiguous what even something as apparently concrete and substantive as matter actually is, which is quite interesting. But then if we go to what we call experience and say, whatever the experience might be, a sensation, that we label as a sensation, for example, or a thought or an emotion or a memory, we can apply that same kind of analysis that the physicist might to matter when they ask, well, what is matter constituted of? What is it made of? What is it comprised of? It's very interesting to and illuminating, I would suggest, to ask the same question of our experience. So I'm having some experience. I call it sadness. I give it a word. You say, well, how are you doing today, John? I said, well, I'm feeling kind of sad right now. Okay. So that word is apparently, I'm using a word to refer to something that's being experienced, right? What is that something that I'm referring to exactly? And that's the question. That's the question that has become my, the centerpiece of what I share with people, which is what, in the same way that I might say, I use a word, what the linguists call, the signifier, to refer to the thing being signified, the cup. I say, this is a cup or a mug, right? Okay, so there's this object that it's pointing to. So when we look at any experience, what are the words that we're using actually pointing to? What are they referring to? What is sadness? What is the substance of this thing that I'm so sure I know what it is? Oh yeah, it's sadness. It's like, okay, cool. Now I want you or one to like take that experience that they've named and then go find it. Go find what that word is referring to in your experience. And you will invariably come up empty-handed. You won't be able to locate what it is. You won't be able to get to the final conclusion of, oh yeah, here it is. I know what it is now. It's this. It's like,
it's a complete and utter mystery, isn't it?
It is a complete mystery. And yet what's really curious and trippy, it really is that we have this very distinct sense of a kind of, I call them like, we could call them qualitative, like textures or flavors, right, of experience. So like, it's quite clear to you and me that there's this phenomena, this appearance, this experiential, phenomena that we might describe as sadness, that we know it's the way in which we can sense the way it is quite distinct from another experience, which we might call joy. Like it's got a different flavor that's, kind of arguably unmistakable. Like we know it, which is how we go, well, we can make that distinction, right, between the flavor of sadness and the flavor of joy, much as we can make the distinction between a food flavor, right, of a strawberry or a lemon, right? They're quite distinct and recognizable seemingly as a distinct kind of quality.
Yeah.
But what's so curious is that whether it's a more of a kind of emotional flavor, or a mood flavor like sadness or joy, or a food flavor, it's the same thing. Like what is the taste of a lemon? What's unmistakable? It's a taste of a lemon. It's obvious. You know what it is, right? You recognize it. But what is it that you're recognizing? What is that?
Yeah. You could say millions of words about it, couldn't you? And you still wouldn't even touch what it is. It's that.
That's a funny thing. The most you could say ordinary of human experiences, the everyday humdrum, moments of our lives, are this complete, unfathomable mystery. Like, so you don't have to have some, crazy esoteric, out of your mind experience. It's like, just take the things that you just think of as the most normal human experiences, and they are a complete free fall into infinite mystery and ungraspable. It's just bottomless. You just never get to the bottom of it. You never. It's a funny thing too, because understandably, we would think, conventionally speaking, we would think like that the closer we look at something, the closer we'll get to understanding what it is. Right, we'll finally arrive at like, oh yeah, I finally got to the bottom of what it is because I looked at it carefully, right?
Yeah, some ground substance.
Right, exactly. Like the essence of it, right? We finally have like concluded, or you can take ourselves, like if I really if you look carefully enough, you'll get to the bottom of, the essence of who and what Paul is, right? But actually, the more you look, in a way, you just keep finding more. You just keep discovering more, and so it's like there's too much information there. So and whatever thing you might find that constitutes some aspect of what makes Paul, it's like, well, then you investigate that, and it just keeps kind of fractally like revealing more and more detail and more depth and more information. And so how could we possibly ever arrive at the conclusion of who Paul is, or what Paul is, or what John is? It's inconclusive.
Even on a really basic level, I change throughout the day, just depending on my mood. If I'm in a really good mood, I'll act a certain way and I'll probably be a certain type of person. If I'm in a bad mood, it's everything kind of has this different quality to it. My reactions are different, and that's, you can't say that's the same person.
Well, and I no, exactly. And I think that when we investigate phenomena, we investigate our experience to discover what this is, to explore what this is, that this life. Like I sometimes joke that there's kind of two approaches to life or spirituality. One is like we want to do something through various practices or inquiries to improve the life condition in some way, right? Understandable impulse. But another approach, which I'm involved in, is exploring what is life?
Yeah.
What is life? And so along with when we explore this thing called life, our life, phenomena, experience, and so on, as I was saying, we just keep finding more and more. There's like too much. It's too much information. It's too much detail to arrive at some final conclusion. But you pointed out another really key thing that we can discover quite easily without having to meditate for 30 years, which is that despite conventional notions of things kind of holding still and having some kind of continuity and stability from moment to moment, if we actually look at experience, it can be easily seen that this is just not the case, that the moment is not holding still. It's a shapeshifter. And so that's that just has profound implications for our entire understanding of reality, because so much of the way we kind of operate is as if things are fixed, in the sense of holding still and stable and continuous, when our experience is actually contradicting that. Our direct experience is saying, no, actually, this instant is in the most radical kind of flux and flow and fluidity and instability and discontinuity. That's our experience from instant to instant. It's a curious thing. It's a curious thing in a way that anything would even appear to be stable when we can feel the way in which our perceptions are. This perception of this instant is not static. It's just like my words. My words vanish as they're spoken, right? And so our perceptions vanish as they're perceived. Like the moment the perceiving, the arising of this perception is also its vanishing. So given the instability of things, that really, it reveals, if we look at it, with some care and curiosity, it will reveal the impossibility of definition, the impossibility of conceptualizing what this is. Because if we define a given experience, like, oh, here it is, I've defined it, right? I've put it in a box of explanation. Whatever it is that we just defined is gone.
Yeah.
So how do we define something that is forever shifting? Well, we can't.
And it's almost the opposite to our feeling about what this is so programmed towards defining everything.
Right. This is how it looks now, you know. In another moment, it might look like some blown out, like mystical thing that we would describe as all boundaries dissolving. But again, like that all boundaries dissolving, you know, moment often characterizes kind of this so-called spiritual experience. It's like, okay, well, look at the most ordinary of moments and you'll see it's the same thing. It's all boundaries. There are no boundaries. Even when we're imagining boundaries, that has no boundaries. The most special experiences are the ones that reveal the specialness of all experience. You know, the real light show experience is to see that all there is light show, like even when it looks like it's not a light show, even when you're imagining otherwise. The imagination of this being bound and divided and is just more of the light show. It's more of the undivided light show.
It is. It's just taken on another appearance. That transcendent is no different from what is here right now. It's all within experience. It's only our conceptions and our ideas about it that kind of close it down. They like to put a little prison around it and go, yeah, well, I know what that is. There's no reference points.
So that's the funny thing, right? We have some big, you know, life transformative experience. Where is that past? There really is just this immediacy, always. There's a presence that doesn't come and go, which is the presence of what is.
Living the Life That You Are by Nonduality author and counselor Nick Hyam can help you find authentic peace, confidence, and connection with all that is, right here and now. The book examines the modern-day dilemma of loneliness, revealing that its root cause is the belief that we're all separate individuals bound by personal limitations. We feel disconnected and incomplete, assuming that life's fullness exists somewhere out there, and that we must be, do, or have more for lasting fulfillment. But the truth is, despite our limited appearance, we are actually boundless. There is no divide between our internal and external worlds. This is the ancient philosophy of non-duality. We are the wholeness we are seeking. The life that you are is all that is right now. Every texture, flavor, fragrance, sight, and sound in their abundance. Using radical mindfulness, a combination of mindfulness and non-dual self-inquiry, this book will guide you toward awakening to the transformative truth and love that is your foundational being.